Hello and welcome to the Game Football Podcast from The Times. Well, so much for chaos, eh? 10 games into the Premier League season and the top of the table has a familiar look to it after wins for Liverpool, Manchester City and leaders Arsenal. Just behind them, Chelsea got an important victory at Tottenham as the home fans showed their displeasure at Thomas Frank. And at the bottom, West Ham picked up a huge 3 points while Nottingham Forest showed some fight in a draw with Manchester United. Thankfully, Wolves introduced a little chaos to the weekend as they sacked manager Vitor Pereira after a defeat at Fulham. I'm Tom Clark, and joining me to discuss all of that and much more, we have the senior sports writer and Sunday Times columnist Alison Rudd, the football reporter who covers teams in the south of England with a focus on Tottenham, it's Tom Allnut, and the former footballer turned journalist Gregor Robertson is here as usual. Hello team, good morning.
Hello Tom.
Good morning, Tom.
We're back in a different studio today. Alison, you look quite upset about it.
Yeah, it's atrocious, outrageous.
Yeah, you've been taking it up the chain, right? Yes, we're in a slightly different studio this week. We've been in our fancy, brilliant new studio, but we swapped out to allow our colleagues, the Ruck, to go in that studio today, talking about the autumn internationals. No, we're all one happy team here, Tom. It's fine.
It's poor, in my opinion.
It's the wrong ball.
Yeah. These guys might not like it, but I do. Make sure you go and check out the Ruck podcast during the autumn internationals. Now, there's loads and loads of football to talk about, the right ball, and one team perhaps not using that ball very well this season. That's a poor link, isn't it? Let's be honest. We've done better in the past, haven't we?
Very clunky.
Very clunky, but we got there. Wolves! I should have just said Wolves. Wolves sacking their manager Vitor Pereira despite only giving him a new deal in September. They picked up only 2 points from their opening 10 games, defeated at Fulham. Gregor, are we surprised? It's surprising in the context of the fact that he had a new deal, but not surprising in terms of their form, maybe?
No, the deal was the surprising.
Right.
The new deal was the surprising thing, I think. Although, I saw the stat that they're the first, in Bill Egger's column today, they're the first team in top flight history to follow 6 successive wins with no wins in the next 14.
Yeah, it was amazing.
There were grounds for that new contract. It maybe took a little long to sign.
Yes.
But it was still strange after the start of the season they had. And I don't know, he just, after kind of bringing so much energy and a remarkable uptick in performances last season, you've got to remember, I think it was the same. They hadn't won in 10 games at the start of last season with Gary Neal.
Failed to win the opening 10 league games in both seasons now.
Yeah. So, and they were 17 points above the relegation zone at the end of the season. So, it is a remarkable turnaround. But I have to say, we all kind of, when we did the prediction show at the start of the season, Wolves were the team you picked out because the sort of turnaround in their squad, having lost more big players.
Yeah.
And then looking at the replacements, there was no Premier League experience whatsoever, and there was a lot of just what felt like punts. Players who you need one or two of them to actually hit the ground running, and none of them have.
Yeah.
None of them have made an impact. So it's a little bit sad because he was he's someone who's had such a kind of remarkable journey in his career as well. The number of clubs and the number of...
He talked about wanting to manage in England as well. He'd gone for jobs before. And
I looked at his career early in the season. It was I think there's only 2 or 3 clubs he's lasted more than 2 years at. He's been he had so many jobs, and then it's just completely unravelled. But there are bigger issues at Wolves than the manager. So I'm not sure that there's going to be any magic remedy here.
No, well, I mean, also Charlotte Dunker reporting this morning that Gary Neal is under consideration for a potential surprise return to Molineux. Does that, Tom, perhaps speak of a club, and as I say, me and Greg are referencing that stat about losing 10 league games at the opening of 2 seasons back to back now, a club that perhaps don't have a big picture idea really going on where they are at the minute?
Yeah, muddled thinking, isn't it? I think Wolves are sort of toyed around this idea of deferring kind of decision making to kind of sporting directors and making it more of a kind of fluent club, which is kind of the modern way, right? But I think then Pereira came in and impressed so much that actually they kind of gave him more authority in the transfer market in the summer, which is always a risk, And I think it's interesting because we sort of talk about, you look at the list of the players they signed in the summer, and you're right, you look at those names and, none of them have got Premier League experience. But I guess, we look at teams like Brighton and Bournemouth sometimes, and they do that. And they bring in those players, and you think, wow, they've just discovered this gem from, Ligue 1 or something. But you've got to get it right. It's a really high-risk, high-stakes kind of operation.
They've still got a core of players who have had that experience in the league for a long, long time now.
Yeah.
Wolves didn't really have that.
Yeah.
They kind of sold that.
Yeah.
But it does show, I think, that it's difficult to pull that off, year in, year out. You've got to have a really good recruitment team. And eventually, it felt like Wolves had to have a really good summer. If they let go of Cunha, let go of Aït-Nouri, let go of Semedo, these kind of big players that they, really kept the team ticking over in recent years, they had to have 2 or 3 of those signings kind of hit the ground running straight away. And I think that churn and bringing in players who didn't have that experience weren't able to kind of come in and replace those players straight away as done for them. I mean, you look at the stats, they're damning, aren't they? I mean, I think the problem now is who do you get to come in and take on a job like this? Because is it 2 points, 10 games?
Yeah.
And I think that's happened 6 times before. All 5 teams have gone down, and I think 4 of those 5 finished bottom. So that there's no precedent for a team having this bad a start and staying up. So if you were a manager, why would you want to come in now and think you take over this team and you go down as a relegated manager? It's not a good job to take.
And as I alluded to in the opening, we've been talking this season about this season of chaos, things turning on their head. The teams come up have at least showed some promise as well. So you're not going in going, I need to climb out and I'm battling for 1 relegation place here. They're bottom.
And they've lost against all 3 of the
lost against all 3. And then you've got West Ham, who we're going to talk about. Forest have changed their manager twice, but are looking a little bit improved under Sean Dyche. So, yeah, I mean, would you agree, Alison, with Tom's point? I mean, who takes the Wolves job now?
Well, I mean, their ambition is so limited that in some respects it's a relatively easy job to take, because you're not being asked to do the impossible, which is mid-table, which would be impossible. You're being asked to perform a Houdini act. And I think that is quite tempting to a lot of the egos in managers, because you're actually achieving very little, but you're probably treated like a messiah for doing so, because...
But you don't think even to get them to 17th in the context of what the season looks like, it might pan out, much more competitive.
It would be very competitive. But and that would, if you are going to think it through calmly, you'd probably steer clear, because Wolves' raison d'etre seems to be to survive in the Premier League. And now this season it's proving to be more difficult than anyone would have anticipated. There was an acceptance, wasn't there? That we're getting to. I mean, you just had to listen to Gregor on this podcast to assume there was an acceptance that promoted clubs weren't doing enough to stay in the division, and they've altered that narrative. I mean, it might well be that at least 2 of them do drift back into the bottom, but they've got a head start on Wolves now. And if you're joining a club that doesn't have some long-term vision or something about it, which in its structure and history and so on says, we really feel we should be challenging for X, Y, or Z. Wolves don't seem to have that. They just seem to have this sense of, if we can stay in the Premier League, wow, the land of golden riches and opportunity, will be all right. So, and they don't have that. So you'll probably think, would I get the backing or the support I need from the infrastructure to even just get out of the bottom 3? But as I say, the flip side is, because that is such a small, you're not asked to win a trophy, you're not asked to get into Europe, you're not even asked to be mid-table, you're just asked to be the messiah who gets them out of what now looks like even more than it was under O'Neill.
Yeah.
It's now, it would be an amazing task to do, and I think most experienced managers would think they'd have that in them to do it.
One thing you'd say is, a lot of this has been not inflicted upon them, but it's because of financial spending rules, and at least they've complied with them. Forest didn't, Leicester didn't.
Want bonus points for complying with rules?
But when you look at the fact, since 2023, summer 2023, they've sold £330 million worth of players. And you look at them: Cunha, Pedro Neto, Mateus Nunes, Ruben Neves, Max Kilman, Ryan Aït-Nouri, Nathan Collins. All of them have gone for decent money, and they're players they probably really wouldn't want to sell.
Yeah.
And the only the problem is, ultimately, the only winners out of the players who've come in have been Strand Larsen and Andre and João Gomez, 2 midfielders, ironically, who weren't picked at the weekend. So, that has been the root cause of their decline.
Yeah.
They've had to sell a lot of players partly to comply with spending rules, and they've not been able to pick enough winners. Yeah,
it's a developing story, so I'm sure we'll pick up Wolves again on Thursday's show later in the week. Alison, just very quickly, a good win for Fulham. We had a week, didn't we, after last Monday's podcast, where we all went, oh, blimey, look where Fulham are in the table. And then I went, oh, blimey, Fulham are suddenly relegation candidates. Don't panic over, right? No?
Probably, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to look at the managers. In all the games we're discussing today, it's about what the managers did in difficult circumstances. And Marco Silva was one of those managers who had to make an impact. And he, he didn't get the influx of players in the summer. He's having to juggle what you could argue is potentially a stale squad, but he added zip to it by moving Alex Iwobi into midfield, which is, it doesn't sound like a huge thing, but he did it, and it worked.
Yeah.
And they sort of were more boisterous and dominant in the game, and were able to take control of the game and ignore the noise around their 17th place position. So I think they'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah, Fulham moving up the table, Leeds and Burnley moving down. But it was a win for West Ham that I want to talk to next. Still in the relegation zone, but a huge win for Nuno Espirito Santo at home against a Newcastle side who are having a bafflingly fascinating season. We'll come on to them in just a second. But Alison, there was a line in your report that you said this was perhaps the first step towards saving West Ham's season. Is this against the backdrop of what's happening on the pitch?
Doing a lot of heavy
or off the
lifting,
pitch?
that word, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, it was the most curious afternoon. All the chatter before kickoff was that this is a desperately bad season for West Ham, and what would the atmosphere be like? And there was a planned sit-in after the game, which did take place. There was practically no one in their seats 10 minutes before kickoff.
Really? Is that unusual for West Ham? Is that unusual for a Premier League?
It's not particularly unusual when West Ham are doing badly.
Right.
But if they were doing well, there'd be a bit more
Yeah.
of a vibe 10 minutes before
Yeah.
kickoff. It's the first time I've heard Freed from Desire played and it having no impact whatsoever.
And you're just dancing on your own?
On my own. It's the feel-good song, and it didn't have an impact at all. And then you get Jared Bowen hitting the woodwork in the 4th minute, and then Newcastle go and score at the other end, and you think, well, fate has decreed that this is going to be an absolutely abysmal afternoon for West Ham. And then 2 things happened. Oddly, given there was no support really in the stadium, West Ham decided to be stoic about this setback, and they looked like they were pulling together and creating stuff and being quite aggressive, and they didn't exude that negativity that would come from a team at the bottom. And Newcastle, having scored in the 4th minute, clearly just packed up their sandwiches and said, that's it, we've done all we can do here. And so the game sort of tilted to one side. It was very strange. And I mean, Eddie Howe said afterwards they were unrecognisable. To him, they were unrecognisable. They were unrecognisable as a team,
right,
to an external viewer. So, whilst West Ham were able to, so you've got to decide what happened there. Was it Newcastle just so abysmal away from home that anybody, even a team with as poor a home record as West Ham, could get their act together? Or did West Ham get their act together? I mean, they did a bit. It had nothing. There were elements.
Did they look like a team? Because you talked about teams there. They did look like recently, a team. I've heard from West Ham fans who listen to this podcast saying the selections are awful.
Yeah.
Nuno in one of his games recently, I think he changed both fullbacks at half time and things like that. Whereas I had a friend who's a West Ham fan who said, first time the team's been right for ages. Fans all think that
the team wasn't quirky. The team was like they put Irving in midfield, and he'd been slagged off as being not quite ready for the battle.
Potts is unproven too, though.
But Potts worked. So that was a risk that worked. He could probably argue as man of the match, maybe, because probably so little was expected of him. But the formation, players were in their correct position. Wan-Bissaka was back at right back and played like a good right back, and it was cohesive. Paqueta, who you expect occasionally to have flair, if you're lucky, he had flair. Yeah. So they did look like a team. They did not look like a team that are being considered as relegation candidates and in crisis. And then slowly, the crowd realised what was happening. Were very pleased with what they saw. So the atmosphere became positive. They all fed off each other. There was still a sit down at the end, mind you. About a couple of 1,000 fans stayed behind to make their feelings known about they don't like the way the club is being run. But if you just watched that game in isolation, you would say, Nuno's gone through a tricky patch getting to know the team. He's without a lot of his normal backroom staff. They haven't been appointed. So he's probably feeling a little lonely. And he's starting to get to grips with it. But, the caveat has to be, was that the worst away performance ever in the history of the Premier League? Newcastle is up there.
Well, I'm definitely going to come back to just a second, but just on the idea of Nuno, Tom, like, he's a good manager, isn't he? That's the thing. He's got a game against Burnley at the weekend, and as Alison said, this is perhaps a sign of, you know, a guy getting it together, which will give West Ham a chance.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about him not getting the team right in his first few games, but it feels to me like he's almost been having like his own little pre-season, you know, where he's been kind of trying players out in different positions. Hasn't quite worked, maybe, but if you go from a kind of Potter style to a Nuno style, like, there's going to be that sort of transition there. I mean, I look at the team and suddenly it feels like West Ham have got legs again, you know, and that's always been the problem the last year or two. In the midfield, it's been way too stodgy, way too slow and ponderous. And suddenly you bring in, okay, Potts, you've got Mateus Fernandes and Paquetá sort of next to him. You've got Somerville suddenly, who's hardly played in the last year, or, you know, since he signed, who West Ham fans really want to see play. He brings that penetration, that speed on the break. And you suddenly look at the team and you think, actually, yeah, there's some dynamism there again. Whereas I always look to the West Ham side and you think it's a bit sort of bit noisy,
yeah,
a bit kind of drop in and kind of keep it compact, and where's it actually going to go? And I think the one thing with Nuno is it's not necessarily going to be pretty, and maybe that's going to be a problem further down the line for the West Ham fans, by the way. But I think this season, what he'll do and what he's always done wherever he's gone, get the basics really right. You know, he instills that kind of rigid defensive structure, gives the players really simple instructions. He's not the kind of coach, and there are lots of these coaches in the Premier League now who go really into the minutiae of details and video analysis. Nuno's way is to give them 2 or 3 clear instructions and say, this is your job and you do this job. Yeah. And I think we'll see that from West Ham in the next few weeks. You know, there'll be a much more simple, straightforward team, less exciting, but I think much more effective.
Yeah, positive signs for West Ham. So coming back to Newcastle then, and I teed it up earlier, what a weird and wacky season they're having in lots of respects. They've got Nick Vold-Marde, one of the signings of the summer. Everyone loves him. They're doing okay in the Champions League. They've got a home game against Athletic Bilbao on Wednesday, but they're 13th in the Premier League. And Alison Rudd, you said this is one of the worst away performances you've ever seen.
Yes, well, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because they're going to a club in crisis who have a very poor home record. So if fate has decreed that you are a club whose away form isn't as good as your home form, this is the game you pick to get your away form going, because you're facing a team in the doldrums who've got no support. You're not even fighting against a fan base, and you score early in the 4th minute. And you've managed to avoid going a goal down by the width of a post. Fantastic. Gods are on your side. Go for it. They completely slowed everything down to it was like watching a game on treacle. It was awful. They just slowed it and slowed it and slowed it. Talk about coasting when you've taken the lead. Because for like 5 or 6 minutes, they looked great, and then they slowed everything down. Eddie Howe made 3 subs at half time, said he could have, for the first time in his Newcastle career, he could have taken everybody off, anybody and everybody off, because it was the worst he'd seen them play. There was no dynamism or energy. He called them unrecognisable. And if you were to play back-to-back some recent home games from Newcastle with that one, you'd say, I don't understand. This does not compute. What is going on? How can they be the same players with the same manager and the same history? How is that possible? And it is incredibly strange. It's as though at home, because it's a great place to go and there's a great atmosphere, they feed off it and they're full of energy and they push and they have that dynamism that was so lacking. But I do not see why you have to be the inverse of it when you go away. And it's very strange that Eddie Howe can't solve it.
We talk like all we want about the tactics and the personnel and stuff, but like Nuno basically summed up afterwards, like it was about the fight and the desire. That's like West Ham haven't shown that for a long time for whatever reason, and they did in this game, and Newcastle didn't. That's why the result was what it was.
Is there a bit of a home and away thing going on with Newcastle this season? I mean, in terms of results, draw at Bournemouth, defeat at Brighton, defeat at West Ham, but they're getting wins at home, big wins in Champions League, win in the Cup.
Yeah, there's a lot of contrast. There's a home and away contrast. There's kind of Europe and the Premier League contrast, and to some extent, and goals as well. There seem to be free scoring in Europe, but not quite as much in.
But there is an interesting thing here where it's early days. It could be a good season, but they could end up having one of those seasons where they get to semi-finals of cup competitions and finish 8th, and you're like, actually that's a bad season, isn't it? Aston Villa had it last season where they were fantastic in Europe, brilliant. They gave PSG a great game and absolutely brilliant, and then just at the last minute they fall into the Europa League, and you're like, oh my God, we've messed it all up. It's like that's how tight it can be.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone can finish in that one spot of fourth and or 2 spots of fourth and fifth, you know. So, you look at the table now, I mean, you've got between 8th and 13th, you've got Man United, Aston Villa, Newcastle, Brighton, Palace, who everyone, thinks have had good starts. Like, there's sort of these sleeping teams down there who actually, I think, are kind of going under the radar. It's a very tight and condensed table, but I think the reality is, when you have 2 or 3 kind of outliers, Sunderland, Bournemouth, for example, suddenly some of those big teams who assume they're going to be in the Big Six, I think they probably will be eventually. But for now, it's a very tight mid-table, isn't it? You can win a couple of games and you get up there at the moment, and you lose a couple and you're in the bottom half.
Yeah, intriguing season for Newcastle. We'll see how they get on. I'm sure we'll discuss them on Thursday's show after that Champions League match. Talking about teams sleeping in that mid-table area, Tom, Manchester United, Gregor, getting a draw at Nottingham Forest, 2-2. Was this a fair result, firstly? That kind of nice, broad, open-ended question for you to take wherever you want. Was this a fair result in the game?
Just about, yeah. I mean, Forest were the better team in the second half, no doubt. Manchester United were decent in the first half, and they probably could have gone in maybe 2-0 up, actually. Right. And then just the start of the second half was like, you just realised that all the progress from Manchester United in recent weeks is probably quite fragile.
Why so? What happened?
2 crosses into the box.
But were they sleeping? Were they sloppy?
They started the half really badly, and Forest started it absolutely fueled by indignation of the circumstances of the first goal, which was obviously the ball wasn't out. Shouldn't have been a corner kick awarded. It's the second week in a row that they've had an incident like that. It happened at Bournemouth last week, and as much as Dyche said afterwards that he said just put that. No disappointments, no disappointment. Like it's one of his sayings. He's always said, I've got these sayings. He's like, no disappointments. We'll part that to the end of the game. But that really is saying come on. He just said play with freedom, but really it's that's a joke. Come on, go out and put it right. And they did. They flew at them in the start of the second half. Scored 2 goals in 2 minutes, and then they were quite comfortable as well. United had one chance when Bruno Fernandes daisy cutter hit the post, and then Casemiro didn't manage to tuck away the rebound, and then it just needed a moment of magic from Ahmad, and it wasn't a moment of magic. What a goal! And it's kind of his sort of performance and his presence actually in United's team kind of sums up a bit about where they are. He's not a wing back.
You don't think?
We had this conversation before, and
he was fantastic against Liverpool.
He's been a big positive. Clearly, he scored his goal, and he had another attempt in injury time, another great kind of half volley. Cleared off the line brilliantly by Murillo, so he could have won the game for them. But at the same time, he was jumping with Morgan Gibbs-White for the first goal, the equaliser. He didn't look like he wanted to be doing that. Yeah. And Forest were trying to isolate him as well. They often fullback would go inside as opposed to trying to they just leave Callum Hudson-Odoi with him 1-on-1. And he had a bit of a difficult time. That, to be fair, Dallo did as well on the other side.
Is that avoidable, Gregor? If you have a wing back like that, should it be someone like Yoro, for example, who shifts along and sees that happening before it happens?
Well, clearly that's one way around it. But if Forest are trying to almost create the overload inside as opposed to outside, then that gives him a conundrum. So it's not an easy. Really, what you want is a wing back who can defend, and he's not that.
But then you lose that attacking impetus.
But Amorim said that after he admitted it. He went, "I know he can do better, but we leave him on the pitch for that reason." And you can't really question that because he is one of their most dangerous creative outlets.
So would you say he's more of a winger? Like a traditional winger being made to play wing back.
He could be playing in the 10 role, but Mbeumo and Cunha have been good, and they were quite good again in this game in the first half in particular. And Sesko, although he still looks a bit of the weak link. I mean, he made good runs. He stretched Forest back line, and that created the space for Cunha and Mbeumo. But there were times where chances fell to him, and he just didn't look convincing yet. He had one really good shot on the turn from 20 yards, whistle past the post. But then Mbeumo as well later in the first half arced this beautiful ball in from the halfway line into his path, and you're just thinking, it's a touch and a finish, or even a first-time finish, and his touch just let him down. It rolled straight into the keeper's hands. So he needs to kind of up it really. Yeah. But the other interesting thing was Amorim's sort of response to it. He said, "We'd lose this game." In past, not so long ago, basically, we would lose this game. And actually, he said, probably quite comfortably, by more goals. So
God love him, honestly. He just can't help himself over room.
He doesn't need to say that. No. He doesn't need to. But
The first line's good enough, Ruben. You don't need to have the extra, the extra humdinger.
Yeah,
just leave it.
doubles
We're fine.
down on it,
We're happy with the first opening line. That's great. That's about.
But are you still watching? Have we moved on from the? I hope we haven't moved on from the 3-4-3 debacle. Are you still watching Man United live and thinking, oh my God, if only they had a decent formation, they'd be a better team?
Just very quickly before you answer that, I noticed the stat. This is the 37th Premier League match in charge for Manchester United, but Ruben Amorim named for the first time an unchanged starting 11 for the first time.
Yeah.
So that idea, we're all saying after Liverpool, he cracked it. This is the team. This is the 11.
No, there were things in the first half you were watching thinking, no, this. They do look more sort of comfortable and sort of aware of their roles and responsibilities, and like having Luke Shaw is so important. There were times where he steps out and plays that kind of eye of the needle pass, like incisive ones, breaking the lines into Bruno's feet. He did that in the first half, in fact. Great ball into him. He played it out wide to Diallo, and that's when you think, oh, they can cut through a team quite quickly in this shape. Diallo's moving forward, and he cut inside and almost scored. Like, even Casemiro and Bruno, on paper you're thinking, and actually long term you're still thinking, but they're doing a job. They're doing the job pretty well now. And Cunha and Mbeumo are really important. So you're starting to see that they look more comfortable in it.
So like centrally the spine, but then you've got questions at the wing backs, which are the most important position in this system. Probably
Dalot too. I mean, he's been someone who, like, if, in any other era in Manchester United's history, he might have like 20 appearances. He's not. I don't think he's a Manchester United player, and he's solid. And if they're playing a back four and he's right back, he's solid. But asking him to play on the left as a wing back is a lot. It's a big ask for him, and ultimately the wing backs are still their biggest issue.
But then long term, what do they do? I mean, do they sign a right wing back? Who's a bespoke wing back,
yes.
and then how does Ahmad get in the team? He doesn't, and he's one of the best players.
That's his problem. Like, ultimately, they need to be in a position where they're not relying on. They're not saying, if we don't have Mbeumo or Cunha playing, who are we playing? They want to have Mount on the bench. They want to have Dalot fighting for that position. That's what they need, and they need people who are comfortable in the wing back positions. I'm not sure Dorgu's the one. I mean, why is Dorgu not playing? He's obviously got some doubts. Yeah,
interesting. Just a final word on Forest to bring it back to them. You've seen 3 matches of the Sean Dyche era now. Think they'll be okay?
I do. Yeah. I mean. Yeah, the one thing about Dyche is he spent a lot of time already just complaining about refereeing decisions, and like he has grounds to.
He's a Nottingham Forest manager. He has to. It's in the contract, isn't it?
No, he's Dyche. That's who. It's Sean Dyche, and you remember? Oh yeah, this is why. Like, PGMOL must have been going, oh God, he's back, because there's no one who's going to make a louder noise about the circumference of a ball being like maybe a few millimeters over the line, and that's what it was like. And it actually is interesting if you think about it, given it's an interesting sort of debate, all the march of technology and VAR.
It's a blind spot, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You're relying on an assistant referee on the other side of the pitch, so that's almost 70 metres away, looking through, as Dyche was making clear very loudly, looking through the posts, looking through a crowd of players and trying to decide whether that ball is out or not, and the referee's at another angle, which is not straightforward.
It's a guess.
Although you don't want the march of VAR to kind of this sort of creep ever further into the game.
Suck it up, Sean. Spot. Leave it. Leave it.
There's enough. They've enough. Why could you not have assistants on both sides of the pitch?
It doesn't have to be VAR. It can be another buzzer, can't it? If they bother putting the investment in.
Can you extend the Hawkeye thing from the goal line technology? I don't know.
There was an idea, wasn't there, to have officials on the goal line?
Yeah, there was for a bit. Yeah. They did it in a tournament, didn't they? In an international tournament.
Yeah.
And it just created
that's the wrong angle too.
More people making bad decisions.
But also, if you only have one, you'd have to have the guys sort of running around the back of the net to try and get to the right side, wouldn't you?
Yeah, but it's also the perfect illustration of how VAR has made us think that everything should be perfect.
Yeah. Anyway, I asked you if Nottingham Forest were going to survive, and you've ended up talking about VAR.
No, I think yes. Yes. I think they were really good against Porto. They were knackered against Bournemouth, and they were good in this game, and actually could have won it. They had a chance. They had chances. Hudson-Odoi and Elliot Anderson had a chance just before Ahmad had the chance to win it. So either of them could have won it. It was a great game.
Yeah, positives for Nottingham Forest and some for Manchester United in there as well. I tell you what, Alison, I do like being back in the studio. It keeps you on the toes with all the mad noises you can hear in the background, just in case you're picking any of those up in your ears when listening to this show. It's not us, I promise. It's just the inner workings of the News UK building. We're going to take a little break, but we'll come back. There'll be loads more still to talk about at the top of the table, but it's time for a little quiz question courtesy of Bill Edgar's column in The Game. Which Arsenal player is the first to win on each of his first 10 starts for the club? Find out after the break. Welcome back to The Game Football Podcast from The Times. I'm Tom Clark and I've got Tom Allnut, Alison Rudd and the man who... You're basically cheating at the quiz now because you know where I get
Because I read the paper.
You get the question, you know where I get...
Imagine reading the newspaper this morning.
Don't prepare to come on a football podcast. That's cheating. That's no good. The answer to the quiz question, Gregor, was...
Ebi Eze
winning first 10 Arsenal starts. We'll talk about them in just a second, but let's talk about two other clubs in London, Tottenham and Chelsea. A big game on Saturday evening. Tom, you were there, and I think we've got to start with Tottenham, which is your club, your expertise for the Times. Gregor, I mentioned on last Thursday's show about a couple of listeners who got in touch after last Monday's show, very upset that we hadn't mentioned Tottenham. They'd gone to Everton, they'd won 3-0, fantastic. Why hadn't we mentioned them? Anyway, listener Chris, who might have been one of those people last week complaining, got in touch with me this weekend to say, Tom, remember last week when you didn't mention Spurs on the podcast? Please don't mention them this week. I now agree that Spurs is not an important fixture to focus on. That Liverpool team, wow, they are back. Much more interesting, I'd say. Well, Chris, unfortunately for you, like most journalists, I am a bit of a contrarian at times. So we're dedicating all of the... No, I'm joking. But we have to start with Tottenham. It's very interesting what's happening at Tottenham at the minute, isn't it, Tom? With Thomas Frank. Let's start with the manager. Boos at the end of this game. And I was speaking to a couple of my colleagues on the desk who are Tottenham fans, who often give us a good grounding. They're season ticket holders. They go. Nick, who said several things. Most conservative team he could have picked, in his view. There seems to be no plan for playing in possession. If he doesn't change something soon, he won't last long, I don't think. Never heard boos like it on Saturday. It's giving me Nuno vibes. So this is not me. This is from a Tottenham season ticket holder. Your thoughts on all of that?
I've heard boos like it at Tottenham, for sure, in the last few years. But it's definitely true that Tottenham are not passing the eye test at the moment. I think if you look at the sort of the table, fifth, the third at kickoff, unbeaten in the Champions League. I think if you're not sort of seeing Spurs play week in, week out, probably a lot of people are thinking, what are they moaning about? You know, the results look okay. And actually, strangely, I think they've got the best record in the Premier League away from home. I think they've taken 13 points out of 15 or something. But the real problem has been the home form. And it's definitely true that creativity has been an issue throughout the whole season, to be honest. It's been kind of rumbling on that at home they haven't been creating enough, not enough fluidity. The forward players, none of them really informed. Kudus had a really good start to the season, and even he now has started to tail off. And I think all those kind of concerns really came to kind of a head in this match, because there was this idea as well, I think, going into the game. Spurs are really drumming up this idea of making the atmosphere better, you know, improving the sort of the home form, getting everyone together. There was a new kind of pre-match video from Frank up on the big screen where he was talking about energy and noise. They had sort of the fire blasting out. The fans had kind of met up before the game to sort of, pump up songs, a bit earlier than usual. There was this idea, let's kind of get in together, this big London derby, 5:30 kickoff, and make this kind of a reset almost at home. And within 5 minutes, Spurs just weren't creating anything, and everything just went, downward. And you sort of think, is it the Frank approach? Is it that he's kind of tweaked the dial too much? Because ultimately, you have to go back to the start of the season. And you think, well, where were they under Ange? Of course, what were the kind of top 2 or 3 things on the to-do list?
I nearly got relegated
for Frank, right? They were bring in some defensive steel, make them more adaptable, make them harder to beat, better from away from home, and all those things. To be fair, tick tick tick. Frank has done those jobs, and he's done them quickly. We're 2 or 3 months in. And this Tottenham team looks much more solid, much harder to beat, much more compact. And the stats say that as well. Yeah. But it is true that creatively, they're really struggling. And it's 0.01 XG at home, even against a side like Chelsea, you can't blame the atmosphere. You can't blame the fans. You can't even really blame the players, I don't think. There has to be more than that. And I think the problem that Frank has right now is people are already starting to think, is this a Brentford manager, who can't do it for a Tottenham team? Was he good at Brentford, where he was able to kind of instill culture and unity, and that would get you so far? and particularly against bigger teams, you could sort of adapt and come up with a sort of a bespoke game plan. But actually, when you have to sort of create a team to go on the front foot yourself, is he able to do that? And I think that question mark now is kind of getting a little bit louder. What I would say, I have to say, is that if you look at the Spurs options at the moment that he has in the kind of the front third, we go back to that sort of, that Poch era team. You've got Dele Alli, Eriksen, Son and Kane. Since Eriksen left, the players Spurs have signed in those positions in the last few years, Xavi Simons, Kudus, Tell, Maddison, of course, injured at the moment, Manus Solomon, Timo Werner, Danjuma, Brian Hill, Bergwijn, and now Colin Mwani. I mean, none of them have been successes. I mean, even Maddison, who had a good streak under Ange, obviously out injured now, and Kulusevski out injured as well. 2 big misses, Solanke, of course. So there's some real injury context there. But Spurs haven't had enough hits in the kind of front department for too long. And you look at the players that Frank's trying to deal with right now, with the injuries, with the signings that are kind of struggling. Richarlison, Odegaard, Kudus, Brennan Johnson coming off the bench. These are sort of players you wouldn't really be surprised to see in a Fulham squad, in a West Ham squad. No discredit to them, but it's not a kind of top 4. It's not a top 4 or top 5 team, is it?
So it's an absolute miracle they're 5th.
Here we go.
No, but it is. When you strip back what Tom's just said, and I agree with everything he's said, they do not have really good creative players. They don't have them.
But
let's remember that they're tied on points with Manchester United, who are in 8th. Like the table is odd so far. I don't think they're the 5th.
But are we not? But are we not in Gregor Robertson? Both things can be true territory here, of where you can be all the things Tom has outlined and that Thomas Frank we expected him to do. I think that's the thing. Surely is that not the question, Alison? If I'd said to you, we'll be sat in early November, and Tom, our Tottenham man, will have come on and said, Thomas Frank's made them more solid, good away from home, but would that not be the most obvious thing that Thomas Frank could have done? Is that not also against him? And that is why when you move to a big club with big home support, and I'm going to bring in another Tottenham fan here, Glenn, who works at the Times as well, who I'm often referencing, who tweeted at the weekend, this is not Frank out, which I'd say is like the supporter version of like a club statement backing your manager. This is not Frank out, but I think he's smart enough operator to get it right with time. But I do think the horrible style of play and terrible home form mean he's under a lot more pressure already than most observers outside Spurs realise. There's 2 more home games this week in the Champions League, and then against Manchester United at the weekend they've got Copenhagen. Is it? That's what I mean. Can both things not be true? That he can be fantastic at the things Tom has outlined, but you've got to then go again, Thomas. You've got to go higher. You're at a bigger club now. There's more expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. But he can't do it all in 6 minutes, can he, for a start? And also, you say that this is where we might have expected to be. They're good away from home, but not at home. But don't know why you think that necessarily. He was very good at making a very small stadium for Brentford really quite intimidating, and it shouldn't have been, but he made it so. And
but where he could play a certain way at home,
wrong.
And it was acceptable, because it's acceptable to play at home in a certain way for Brentford when you're getting results.
I don't think any manager could have gone in with the personnel he's got, inheriting a team that nearly got relegated. And it's a strange. We've all agreed now. This was supposed to give them the edge. This glitzy stadium. It doesn't. It gives the opposition the edge. They love turning up there. You can always hear I don't know what they've done with the acoustics, but you can always hear the away fans. It's really strange. This wall, this Dortmund-style wall they were supposed to have, doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And if the fans are starting to complain about Frank, look at yourselves first, because you could help that team if you gave them proper support in this huge stadium. They're very quick to see the negative.
One shot on target though, 0.01 XG. It's hard to get behind that.
They were appalling in that match, and Chelsea pressed really well, man for man almost, wasn't it? It was press, and they didn't know what to. They just almost fell apart. But I do think it was only 1-0, and any chance they had to turn that game on its head would have come from a spark of brilliance from an attacker, and there was no attacker capable of a spark of brilliance.
But some of it is kind of structural. I remember Tom and I were at the Villa game, and the whole first half, it was a bizarre game to watch, wasn't it? They're kind of, we've spoken about the kind of horseshoe. They were knocking around at the back, and they were just always Tell would make a run in to try and go in behind and to play a long ball, and they would like, oh no, we'll not do it. We'll just keep knocking around the back for a bit. And Villa were like only pressing on their terms, so they're just we were just watching the team pass it around at the back, like with no current sort of intent, attacking intent whatsoever, apart from trying to pick out the perfect moment or circumstance for someone to make a run in behind to play the long ball. And like, they need something more than that. It's either that or get the ball to a winger and hope that they do something. They're not really even any kind of like creating really any good overloads or any sort of like, certainly, I don't know, any overloads that have any sort of purpose.
But is the point not that, as I say, these fans in this home stadium, that you need to have performances that the home fans will believe in once you're at this level? Because then, I mean, bigger managers and more famous managers than Thomas Frank have had this problem at Tottenham, haven't they? Conte, Mourinho, they all went in, and the fans eventually went, this is rubbish, we hate this, we hate watching this football. Has he got enough there? You've said quite rightly, Tom, I think, that some of the players there aren't perhaps of a Tottenham level or standard that the club would expect. But is there enough there for him to change it, as I outlined there? Two big home games, Copenhagen and Manchester United, before then 2 away games, Arsenal and PSG.
Yeah, I mean, the style thing is always kind of put on Tottenham, and it is definitely there. But ultimately, it's about results. I mean, when Conte's team was playing well and, you know, soaring into the top 4, no one was worrying about that, you know. Yeah. The problem with Tottenham's home form is they haven't been winning enough. You know, they drew at home to Wolves, and Wolves have basically lost every other game this season. You know, it's not just about we want to see free flowing football. They want to just see wins ultimately, and they haven't been winning enough. I mean, I think, is there enough there? The thing with Frank is that when he came in, there was he can tweak the system, you know, and find solutions. And I think that's what he's got to do now, because ultimately there's not, you know, the January transfer window is not around the corner. And then also, what are they going to sign in January? Probably not very much. So he's got to deal with what he's got. They will have Kulusevski coming back in December, hopefully. Solanke's meant to be coming back in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Will make a big difference. Maddison much, much further away. I mean, you go back to the summer as well, you know, and you think now, if they had Gibbs White in this team, would that make a difference? If they had Eze in this team, would that make a difference? You know, saving that kind of 10 million maybe to get those deals over the line quickly.
Yes.
And instead they brought in, you know, Xavi Simons, who, to be honest, has been a disaster so far. You know, he just has not hit the ground running at all. Colin Mwani, who's taken 2 or 3 months to get fit and sharp. If you sort of make those kind of corner cutting in the transfer window in the summer, this is the cost of it. You know, you're in November and you're still waiting for your 2 kind of statement creative signings from the summer to actually make a difference. You know, and if they had maybe 2 Premier League proven players, or even one of those players, what a difference that would make.
If he had Brian and Bumo and Johan Wissa, it would make a huge difference. And that's what he had at Brentford.
So I mean,
you're actually saying he's got worse forward line than he did have a club that was supposed to be fighting relegation every season.
But that said, the game against Chelsea was beyond that. You know, I think it's worth saying that it was really poor. And Frank wasn't hiding. You know, he came into the press conference afterwards, and you could tell from his body language, the way he was talking, that he was. I mean, he said, "I'm burning inside." You know, he said, "I've never in my coaching career managed a team that have created so little." You know, he understood that what he'd just seen wasn't, it was a bad day against a good team, that can happen. You know, he was honest about it. There was obviously the Van der Ven and Spence incident as well. I think he knows he's got a problem, you know, and I don't think Frank is looking at the table and thinking everything's all right. What is everyone moaning about? He knows he's got a problem, and that's a start, you know, because I think if we think of what the strengths of Thomas Frank, and you can talk about the Brentford thing and the, you know, can he create, etc. He is a solution finder, you know, and I think now he has to look at the team and say, okay, this isn't working. We have to try a different shape, different system, maybe bring in 2 up front, whatever it is. They have to find something different, because it's clearly not working right now.
Yeah, just finally a word on Chelsea. Pete Rutzler, our colleague, writing in the paper today about them being very good against teams that are very good at set pieces, which has obviously been a strength for Tottenham so far this season. There is part of this where Chelsea nullified Tottenham's main attacking threat, right?
Yeah, Sanchez was good. He claimed everything. You know, the set pieces.
A phrase not often said on this podcast, actually. Sanchez was good.
The long throws, the corners, you know, Chelsea made them look like they were, you know, no threat whatsoever. Sanchez came for everything, caught everything. I thought it was a sort of clever performance from Chelsea. It wasn't, for me, sort of a, you know, spectacular display. And actually, they probably at the end could have won 3 or 4-0. There was the Bentancur red card as well, which, you know, could have put Spurs in real trouble. But I thought it was a really smart kind of display. You know, they pressed really well. They were very good on the counter-attack. It looked to me like a team that had a really clear plan and executed it very well. And there were 2 or 3 great performances. I mean, Caicedo was just superb again, everywhere. Ultimately made the goal with his pressing. I thought Reece James did well in midfield. Yeah. Sanchez, of course. João Pedro obviously got his first goal in 9 games. I thought it was a smart performance from Chelsea. Not brilliant, but I think it was a really good away win. I mean, they love going to Spurs. They've won, I think, 6 out of 7 now at the Spurs Stadium. I mean, that's an incredible record.
Yeah, as Pete Rutzer said on last week's show, Chelsea are able to pick it up when they need to most in the big games. They've then got Qarabag, Wolves and Burnley up next, so we'll see if they can get the results against teams that they should be beating. Let's finish with a look, as I said at the very top of the show, at the top of the table, a familiar look. And Tom, you've not been on this podcast for a while, but a few weeks ago you said, calm down, Tom. Don't get carried away with this whole chaotic season. The established order will be back. And
apology or no apology?
No, not at all. Because I still believe in the chaos. I still believe in the chaos. But Liverpool, let's start with them. Alison, a big win for Arne Slot after so much talk. So much talk. A 2-0 win. Arne Slot of last season is back. It's a clean sheet. It's 2-0. It's job done, lads. That's. Are you actually on board with it? You weren't on board with the 2-0 wins last season. You must be now.
Well, I think it was really important, but I'm not sure it wipes everything clear and everything sparkling and wonderful again. For a start, he basically relied on last year's team to get him out of the hole, apart from Ekitike, and Ekitike's been the one success story from the summer signings. And I can't stress enough how marvellous it is to see someone who just gets to grips with the Premier League, within minutes of arriving. So he's beloved by the crowd. He's integrated beautifully. But other than him, it was last season's team. So you kind of think, well, there are still problems around the corner because he's going to be under pressure, Slot, to integrate the players the club has spent a lot of money on. And how's he going to do that? Because that's been a part of the problem with Liverpool is they haven't looked cohesive and the signings haven't felt right. The other reason I wouldn't get overexcited about the result is Villa. This was a weekend where a lot of teams did not turn up. And I don't think Villa turned up properly. I mean, I don't think they're probably capable of doing what they should have done, but they played into Liverpool's hands. They tried to pass out from the back, and that went horrendously wrong.
Villa are bucking the trend for everyone deciding that this is madness. They're just doubling down on it. You see.
What's madness? Sorry, you mean the style of play?
Yeah, you see Martinez standing on the ball all the time now, just like drawing the opposition in forward to try and play out and create space. And most teams now, are realising that that's suicidal. Yeah, but Villa are doubling down on it. Yeah. That was another theme of the game, the Tottenham game. So yeah, I mean they gifted them the goals.
But do you think? But I mean, that's the question. Do you think Villa are built in a way that they could have mimicked what Brentford did the week before? I don't think they are built that way. I mean,
you mean play direct?
Yeah, and been physical.
Well, yeah,
they didn't really challenge.
And
either.
Slot had kind of actually said as much. He said teams are playing direct, and we've not really figured out how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And along come Aston Villa, yeah. Well, I mean, this was a theme of your piece at the weekend, wasn't it, Gregor, about the changing styles that we're seeing, not just in the Premier League, but all over the place. I mean, do Villa need to get on board with it, or actually are they going to find a benefit in being an outlier as the season progresses?
Although they do that, they're trying. That's a way of them playing kind of direct quite quickly. The problem is they just fumbled it. And even I think it was Pau Torres, wasn't it, for the second one? Trying to play a sort of under pressure, a pretty aimless ball into the striker. Yeah, I mean, I have my doubts about it because teams are so good at pressing now. Basically, there was a stat I think I said the other day that the teams who created the most goals from high turnovers last season were Liverpool and Bournemouth, and they faced the most long balls this season. So teams have looked at it and thought, why would we just play into their hands?
Yeah.
There's also the environment's changing, isn't it? The sort of what seems kind of culturally acceptable is changing. Teams are going. There's a lot of focus on set pieces, on physicality, strength, power. This is another sort of string to that boat. It's like, okay, let's park that risky business for a bit and go along. And ultimately, as I say, when teams are so good at it, you're playing yourself into trouble. You can gift them a goal and then gift them another goal, the game's gone.
Mo Salah back on the score sheet as well, equaling Wayne Rooney's record for most goal involvements in the Premier League for a single club with 276. Also became the third Liverpool player to 250 goals after Roger Hunt and Ian Rush. Alison Rudd's got a hand in the air. I'm very polite for the first time in the entire time of doing this podcast with you.
I am aware that I've just pointed out why you shouldn't get carried away by a victory over Villa, who got their tactics wrong, but having been at Brentford and seen in the flesh how negative the body language was amongst Liverpool players, with the exception of Dominic Szoboszlai, every player looked up for it. They looked back in terms of resting them from the midweek Carabao Cup game Could have backfired. It didn't. They came back full of energy and positivity, and the crowd responded accordingly. So it could well be the reset that was needed, but there are still big question marks.
Isn't this what sort of Slot should have done from the start of the season?
Yeah, but he's not used to. See, this is the problem. He's never been in a situation at a big club where they spent big money and known how to do it.
Yeah.
I think he was under pressure to throw them all at.
Well, we just got overexcited. It's like on Championship Manager where you sign loads of players and you think, I want to put them all in straight away.
Well,
But
he shouldn't have. But I don't think he's ever been in that situation.
Like
before.
stick with the sort of the solid base of the team you had, and gradually, ease in the signings. I mean, one signing in this starting lineup, wasn't it? And I think Szoboszlai is. I think he's like so key to this team. Playing him in the right place, that whole sort of right back experiment, I think has just really tilted Liverpool in a way that. You need him in that central midfield. He just brings so much. McAllister as well. I think his absence has been massive for him. I think he played his first 90 minutes since April. Bradley played 90 at right back where he should be. Just the balance looked better.
Yeah. I mean, we had a listener, Ashley, get in touch as well after last week's show talking about how we'd not mentioned the sad passing of Diogo Jota, obviously, in the summer as well, and how that potentially could still be affecting some of the players as well. But he did say that he thought there'd be a change in fortunes in 2026 and how the recent games have been a little bit of a pre-season. So potentially this win might kickstart some good things for Liverpool in the coming weeks. But of course, got Real Madrid in the Champions League this week. Manchester City also getting a big win, or should I say Erling Haaland FC? They should just change their name, shouldn't they now? The guy's got a 10-year contract. He scores all the time. He's getting, I love the stat in Paul Hurst's report, 9 different players in the Premier League have assisted Haaland this season. I mean, talking about styles, Gregor, this is the biggest shift ever. Pep, pass it around, don't play a striker. Now, just get it forward to Erling, lads. It'll be fine. But I do think the Pep's quote about the first goal when he's running through, I was watching it. Everyone's just like, well, this is a goal. Every single time.
Was it that one or the second one where Cherky was just like... had his hands up, and he wasn't. He'd probably still 50 yards from goal.
Yeah,
he's celebrating before he
doing
got
the
close
celebration. And of course, Pep Guardiola also making the claim that I wanted to ask you about, talking about Erling Haaland and his comparison with some of the greats that have played the game, and talking about Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. Pep said the numbers from Cristiano and Messi have been consistent for 15 years, scoring 2-3 goals every game. That is the level. Look at Erling Haaland. This is the same. Without him, it would be tough, to be honest. So. Is Pep right? Is Erling Haaland on the same level as Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo?
Well, I think he answered his own thing there, really, in a way that it's the longevity, isn't it? I think if Haaland is 37 years old in, whatever it is, 10 years' time, and he's been hitting 30 goals plus every single season until that period, then I think we'll look back and say, yeah, he was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest goal scorer of all time. I mean, that those kind of numbers in terms of a number 9, that's what Messi and Ronaldo have delivered. It's the longevity. I think the other thing, always with these kind of arguments, is people like artists, don't they? In sport, it's why it's why in tennis people prefer Roger Federer to Novak Djokovic. It's why in cricket you'd rather watch Kevin Peterson than Alistair Cook. Because ultimately people watch sport because they like those players who can deliver things that sort of come not from the training ground but come from where they're brought up,
and
something inherent.
Don't think Haaland's got that?
I think Haaland is more of a Novak Djokovic. Like, he's a machine, and he's got athleticism and power, and everything he does is
drinks raw
absolutely
milk.
Drinks raw milk. Yeah,
like massive
everything
steaks.
he does is incredible. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think he's ever going to ever kind of create that feeling of kind of wonder and awe that I think you would have when you watch Messi and also Ronaldo, to be honest.
Yeah, your eyes widen sometimes, but it's with a different sensation. It's like, oh my God, look at the power of this man. Like when he's running through, and look at him eating up the turf and like just brushing people off like they're children. It's not the same as watching. So like in like cold hard numbers, yes, he may well come to seen as up there with those two players, but he will never be up there with those two players.
Alison, you're a fan of artistry. Would you agree with Tom's point there about the kind of differing kind of sportsmen that you see?
Yeah, no, absolutely. People love Messi for more than his goals. Messi could not score in a game and you'd still come away thinking, I'm privileged to have watched that. If Erling Haaland has 4 touches and doesn't score, you don't come away feeling the least bit privileged, do you?
You don't think Haaland's got that in him to score the kind of goal? I'm thinking of like a great goal scorer who's maybe... Ruud van Nistelrooy, for example, scored loads of goals and always makes a joke himself about that goal at Fulham. He was like, that's the one goal I ever scored like that, whereas players like Messi score that all the time. You don't think Haaland's got that in him where even using that physicality where he could kind of barge his way through from deep and then smack it in from 20 yards?
Yeah. But the team's never been structured for that. I mean, although it has changed this season. I mean, the goals were really interesting and that Cherky's picked up a little pocket and help the ball on basically, pass, and he's in. And only some opponents will give them that opportunity. But it is interesting that they're basically the focus of their approach now is about getting Haaland in more of those sort of transitional situations, and it's worked. He scored 13 of the 20 goals.
City title contenders?
I think so.
Yeah,
I was at the game against Villa and I was impressed by them actually in that match. And even though they lost, they look smooth. They look like they're kind of ticking again. And I think Nico makes a big difference in central midfield. They didn't have him against Villa, and him coming in there, I think Pep is teaching him to be a defensive midfielder, because when he arrived, a lot of people said, yeah, he's good on the ball, but he doesn't look over his shoulder much, you know. And I think Rodri's going to come back at some point, we assume, but I think he's a really important in there.
He has looked better. Those moments of composure, like on the edge of his own box, as opposed to like just, I don't know, helping it on or playing a pass. He kind of will spin and pick out a really incisive forward pass. Those moments of composure are really important, particularly when you're trying to set Haaland free. So he's been really good, yeah. Right. There've been a few things and I think Nico O'Reilly's like looking really impressive too. I don't know, he got his England call up, and you think he could work his way in there. He'd need to work a bit more
as a fullback.
You need to work like.
You're not going to have that Lewis Skelly thing where you're watching him going, I wish you were in midfield, mate.
Well, they're all midfielders now. There's no real fullbacks. I never shut up about that. Wow. He scored. He got the ball at the weekend, and he had Haaland on his outside.
Yeah.
And he turned down the pass and used him as a dummy to create a space for a goal. Like, he's a good player.
Well, there'll be nothing making Arsenal fans more twitchy than the idea of a Pep Guardiola Manchester City team on the charge, but it was another win for the league leaders. They've won 9 consecutive games in all competitions, their longest run since October 2018. 11 wins in a row under Unai Emery. Honestly, I couldn't believe that stat when you think about how Unai Emery is viewed at Arsenal. They also kept a clean sheet in 7 consecutive matches in all competitions for the first time since between March and April 1999, which was also a run of 7. In the club's history, only between April and October 1903 have they kept more successive clean sheets in all competitions, which was 8, which is remarkable to think that that's very potentially doable with a trip to Slavia Prague in the Champions League this week, a competition in which they've only got 3 wins. So I kind of just wanted to broaden it out with Arsenal as a final question. It's an amazing run they're on. It's amazing form they're in, just so resolutely winning every game. Can they keep it going across all formats? Because they've had a great start in the Champions League, through in the Carabao Cup last week as well. Have they got it in them with this squad that we've talked about and this depth to keep this going?
I think they can. I think they've got the depth to do it. I just think the Premier League title race emotionally, I think, will take so much of their bandwidth this season that I imagine that come April, May, they won't be rotating in the Premier League to do the business in the FA Cup or even the Champions League, to be honest. You know, right. I think the amount of kind of expectation and pressure there will be on Arsenal to get over the line in the Premier League, I think they will just inevitably focus on that. You know, and you look at the teams who do well in kind of multiple competition, particularly in the Champions League over the years, it's often teams who have either had experience of winning their own league title before, so there isn't quite that same pressure, or, you know, they win the title by a distance. You know, and I think the problem that you have in the Champions League right now is it very possible that in the other European leagues, for example, Bayern could have won it by December. Yeah. PSG, similar. Real Madrid, possible. You know, so some of the really big giants in the Champions League may be having a sort of almost like a free run from sort of April onwards, whereas Arsenal, even if they're 12 points ahead of City, they're still going to be feeling the nerves, aren't they?
I'm sure Arsenal fans will definitely agree with you on that. I know a few who definitely agree. Guys, what do we think? Can Arsenal, have they got it, the quality and the depth? Keep going in the Champions League and the league, keep this relentlessness going, set more records, more amazing statistics?
I mean, football has a habit of surprising us, doesn't it? I think as much as the depth is there, and I think particularly the depth is there in forward areas, which is a change this season, I still think if like they lose Gabriel or Saliba, which is possible.
Even with the signings, Mosquera.
Yeah. Pereira and Capi, I think, is a really good player. Mosquera's looked impressive, but neither of them are the same. They're not the same physical sort of presence, like psychological sort of presence as well, and drivers of the team. That's the only question mark for me. But the way they are defensively, like, means they have a chance of doing it all.
Yeah,
they have a chance because, you know, if you concede a number of goals, then like, of course you have.
Yeah, a chance of doing it all. There you go, Arsenal fans. There's a note to end the podcast on, I think. I should just say as well, Tom Allnutt, this is why I'm not quite apologising to you yet on the chaos theory. We're recording this on Monday, and Sunderland play tonight. A win for them would take them back second. Come on, Sunderland. You can do it. But we'll leave it there for now. Tom Allnutt, Alison Rudd and Gregor Robertson, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you too for listening. Me and Gregor will be back with an EFL Extra show this week, and we'll be back with the regular show on Thursday. We'll see you then.